everyone. Welcome back. This is episode number 6 of At the Kitchen Table podcast. I'm Jason Klink, your host. Today, we're talking about leadership and going back to my firehouse roots with this conversation. Leadership is an easy thing to talk about when things are calm. It's much harder when the decision lands in your lap, when things are getting real and the answers are not obvious. And everyone's looking at you for the direction and decision on what to do next. Today, I'd like to introduce Chief Chris Armstrong. Chief Armstrong has more than 35 years in public safety leadership. He was the fire chief in 2 metro-sized all-hazard fire departments. He's a certified coach by John Maxwell, which I've read quite a few of John Maxwell's books. A graduate from the Harvard Kennedy School, the founder of Thinking Chief Leadership Group, and he's a published author with the Thinking Chief Imprint. Chief Armstrong, thank you for joining me today. So,
hey, Jason, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I had put, truth be told, I had put feelers out trying to, attract guests to the new podcast and see who I could sit with. Chief Armstrong had reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I think we'd have a good synergistic conversation." And as soon as I saw his background and some of his stuff, I'm like, well, 2 old chiefs sitting around. Hopefully somebody will want to listen to that and pick up some golden nuggets. So, that's why we're here today. That's why we pulled up a chair to the kitchen table. Before we get into, your Thinking Chief leadership coaching and your leadership group, and your travels, kind of go back, what shaped your view of leadership, even if it was before you were fire chief?
Yeah. I'm not sure I even really thought about leadership, when I was getting into the fire service. That was something that I think kind of came about after a period of time. Most of us, when we go in the fire service, we're there for kind of the adrenaline, right? We're all excited to go fight fire.
Right.
Or do EMS or, whatever it is that draws us in, it's helping people and kind of contributing to our society and our communities. So I did not really think about leadership much as I joined the fire service. It was after I got in the fire service and started to understand it a little bit. And then, when I kind of felt the tug to, strive for some promotions, that's when I started researching and learning about leadership. And John Maxwell's been, kind of my go-to person from the early days.
Right.
I learned about John Maxwell. I've read a bunch of his books, ended up going through, his certification program as a coach and a trainer. And I want to say that, I got a lot of my leadership from him, but kind of like everybody else in the fire service, I had good leaders that I learned from, and I had some really bad leaders that I learned from as well.
Yes.
And it's a lot of times when you're sitting back and you're scratching your head, asking yourself, how or why are they making these decisions? And you start thinking, I could do better than that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
So when you start having that, so I think like everybody else, my leadership has been shaped by the people around me.
Mm-hmm.
The people I watch do a good job, and the people I watch that maybe could do a better job.
Yes.
You kind of learn what to do from some and what not to do from others. And over time, you kind of develop what works for you and your personality. So I'd say that, those are the main things that really have kind of molded my leadership stance, over time. Yeah.
You really hit some nails on the head when you were talking about those that were really great leaders and those that shouldn't have even be in a leadership position. Oh my God. I can think back of at one point I was a DOD firefighter at a military, an Air Force base.
Thank you for service.
So we had this, on the civilian side, we had our civilian fire chief, but for some reason this chief just commanded respect, and without even saying it, right? He just did. And when he spoke to you, if he gave you a direction, it was in short clips, but you just did it. And I remember you never wanted him to catch you standing around the truck stalls with your hands in your pockets during the working 8, we called it.
Right.
Because if he did, he'd come out and find you something to do.
Yeah.
So if he all of a sudden come walking out in the truck stalls, we'd scatter like cockroaches trying to pick up a broom before he had to, find us what to do. But in the same breath, I had company officers that they were all about, see these, just do as I tell you. And that never truly worked. And it was one of the things I always remembered was, okay, just because you got the brass on your collar doesn't make you, a leader.
Yeah.
It's, you said a lot there that really resonates, because it's like you pick up so much, and I didn't recognize it. I didn't grasp it, 20 years ago. I do now.
Right.
I'm a much different fire service leader now than I ever was 25 years ago, or even 20 years ago.
Well, you probably have made more mistakes, right? So you've grown,
God, yeah.
You've learned and you've grown over time, and that changes the way that you lead, right?
Yep.
So it should evolve over time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And my biggest lesson was to learn to listen and to shut up more. Because you really learn more about your people and about what needs to be done when you're listening, than just losing your mind about something and spewing out all kinds of nonsense.
Yeah. Going back to one of the things that you said though, Jason, that, I think is an important takeaway for anybody watching, is that, having the brass doesn't make you a leader. Leadership is a position. But I'm a big believer that leadership is an attitude, and you don't have to be in a leadership position to be a leader. And I think if there's any message that should leave this podcast today, it should be that, right? If you want to lead.
Yeah.
You don't need to be in a position. You don't need to be promoted to be a leader and influence people. So, I think that's an important takeaway. So, the leader that says, "Hey, I have these on my collar," as soon as you do that, you lose all credibility.
100%. Right? How many strong leaders have you seen that were senior firefighters, that they didn't want the collar brass, they didn't want the responsibility to be a company officer or a chief officer, but on the fire ground in the firehouse, a senior firefighter was probably the strongest leader in the house.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that too, Jason, is that most of them, they don't even realize that they're strong leaders.
Right.
It just comes natural to them, right? They care about people. They want to see people succeed. They're willing to get up out of the lazy boy and go work with a new recruit, throwing ladders or pulling hose or whatever it is in between calls, for the benefit of that individual and for the team. And they don't look for the recognition. And, so I've seen a lot of really good firefighters, senior people and kind of junior people, that are great leaders, and they don't even mean to be. It just comes natural. They understand the importance of relationships.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Because and it doesn't have to be the firehouse. It can be any organization.
True.
There's the social connection. There's the human connection. Yeah. One of the best things I learned in my business travels was business to human, not B2B, not B2C, B2G. It was business to humans, and learn how to relate and interact with other human beings. So you are simply coming from a place of value versus, trying to sell something, or, in the firehouse, trying to accomplish a task or accomplish a mission of some sort, having that human value.
Yeah. Well, there's a saying that, some leaders try to acquire followers, but that doesn't make you a great leader. What makes you a great leader is making other great leaders, right? Not followers. You want to create more leaders, not followers. So,
amen.
Yeah.
and so, like, you fully embrace John Maxwell and all the teachings there. And one of the more influencers on me has been Jocko Willink. I've read Jocko's book. I've seen Jocko's content, and his biggest, the two biggest things that I've ever taken away from him is extreme ownership. If you're going to be a leader, you better take extreme, especially if you're a fire chief, take extreme ownership of everything within your mission, and then leading from the back.
Yeah.
Leading from the back and allowing your people to lead, even though they don't realize, kind of go back to what we were talking about, but
Yeah.
leading from their back and allowing your people to do their job
Yeah.
without being that hover parent over the top and worrying about, oh, am I going to get in trouble because they screw up?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a saying that, you really, to be a good leader, you need to empower people because, like I mentioned earlier, right? Your leadership evolved as you grew and made mistakes, and you learned from those mistakes.
Yep.
And for me, I'm not afraid to, let somebody kind of run and take the ball and run with it. And I'm okay if they fall down and fail, because my job as a leader is to pick them up, dust them off, and send them on their way, just like we would our kids, right?
Right.
And the thing is that I'm going to continue to pick you up and dust you off as many times as I need to until you can learn to stand up on your own.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what leaders are supposed to do. We're supposed to empower our people, let them fail. If you don't fail, that's great. And if you do fail, I'll coach you.
Yeah.
And teach. And I'll ask you, what did you learn about this failure? What could you have done different to avoid this failure? Right. And it becomes an opportunity for a leader to coach and mentor people and help make them better. And I think a lot of times we take the easy route, and instead of empowering people and letting them kind of do the job, we think like we have to have all the answers.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny. You just made me think of a lesson of my own, and when you have a weaker, as a chief officer, if you have a weaker company officer, and maybe they're your direct report, and if they're not performing up to the expectations, instead of pointing out that they're doing it wrong, and you're continually pointing out you're doing it wrong, and this is why, but expecting them to correct course without giving them the framework to correct course, are we really, like you said, mentoring them, getting them going in the right direction, dusting them off and getting them going in the right direction?
Yeah.
Because they're just going to keep going back to what they know. And if what they know isn't meeting expectations, we got to get them to a new knowledge base to be able to make that course correction. And it was just something that popped in my head when you were saying that.
Yeah, for me, the framework I always like to use when I'm dealing with performance issues with people, there's always four different pillars, right, to poor performance. Number one, did you know it was your job? Did anybody tell you that this is what you're supposed to be doing?
Right. Yeah.
Right? Number two is, did anybody show you how to do this? Right. Yeah, you understand it's your job, but nobody really showed you how to do it. Number three is, do you have the tools to do your job?
Right.
So I need to know that you know your job. I need to know you've been trained in it, and I need to know you have the tools. And then the fourth pillar, if you have poor performance, is that you just choose not to do any of the first three. And that's where your coaching becomes counseling, right?
Yeah.
But if I go through that framework all the time, it's not about the person. It's about, why is the standard drifting? And how do you get them back to the expectation? Right. And when I do evaluations on people, the first question I always ask them, especially if some of my feedback is going to be some improvement areas, I always ask this, the most important question first is, how am I doing as your supervisor? And the reason that I ask that question is I want to make sure that any performance gaps that they have are not my fault. Right.
100%.
So the last thing I want to do is sit somebody down in front of me and go through a performance issue that I find out later on was my fault. They didn't know it was their job. I didn't train them to do it. I didn't give them the tool. And here I am telling them they're not meeting my expectations. I already haven't met theirs as their supervisor.
Oh, that's a golden nugget right there. And, it goes back to being comfortable training those that will ultimately take over for you.
Yeah.
Not to have that insecurity in there, to make sure that you are preparing. And this is the part of being in that leadership role that I love, is preparing the next generation of leaders and making sure they're prepared to take over for you.
Yeah. Well, and I look at it this way too, because a lot of people are going to listen to this and go, ooh, that's kind of a loaded gun, if I'm going to ask somebody that. And really there's two outcomes to that question, and they're both really positive. One is they say, you're doing great as my supervisor. That's awesome. That's what I want to hear.
Yep.
But if they say, there's a couple areas where I think you're falling short, That's a great answer too, because it gives me an opportunity to improve and be a
Yes.
better supervisor for them, right? So
Yes.
now they're helping me.
Yep.
But I have to be open to that. I have to be strong enough in my leadership and in my belief in myself to humble myself, to put myself in that position. And I'll
Yep.
tell you that, in my opinion, I think that builds strong relationships and a lot of trust with people. And leadership's about relationships and trust, right?
Yes.
So I always, whenever I do evaluations, that's always the first question I ask.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I was just thinking back to, so, my full-time work for almost 20 years was I was a 911 dispatcher.
Oh yeah, that's a hard
And,
job.
and, I worked for some great supervisors. I really did. I worked with some great dispatchers. And then you had the other flip side of the coin. And the thing is, like with civil service, especially in 911, like if you want to be a supervisor, you take a test, you have a good Saturday, you do a good interview, and they promote you. And then it used to be, well, we'll stick you on the supervisor's desk. So you work with a shift supervisor because we had different levels of hierarchy, and you learned how to do administrative tasks and duties. And that was your extent of learning how to be a supervisor. So if you were never a fire chief, if you were never a leader somewhere else, you're not getting taught leadership skills. You're just getting taught admin skills, but you're expected to lead other people, supervise them, correct course, all of the stuff that goes into it, all of the things. But if you don't have that knowledge base to begin with, like we were setting up people for failure as supervisors, especially if they were never supervisors before.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because, I have a philosophy in the fire service that part of the reason why we have a leadership crisis, I think, in the fire service is that it's our processes to identify who our people should be that are in those leadership positions. So, in the fire service, we generally do assessment centers, right?
Right.
I'm going to give you a bunch of these scenarios. And if you've been a fire chief, if you've ever heard anybody practice for an upcoming assessment center, they get on the radio and they give you this 13-point size up and they do it all perfect. And then 3 months after they get promoted, they're not doing that anymore. No. Right. So they told us everything we wanted to hear during the test. But if I asked you what's important for a person in a leadership position, you're going to tell me things like trustworthiness, honesty, the ability to have difficult conversations, somebody that inspires me. And none of that is evaluated in our testing process.
Right.
Right. And then we put people in those positions where those characteristics and attributes we think are important to be in a leadership position. We haven't even evaluated them for that. Right.
Right. Yep.
And there's a big difference between the operational side and the leadership side. Right. So when you move into admin, there's a saying that, people don't care how much they know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
Right. So it's less about what I know and it's more about how I treat people as I move out of operations into administration.
Yeah. And for some people, it's very difficult to change hats. You're changing from a yellow hat or black hat to a red hat or a red hat to a white hat. And when I was at 911, you're going from dispatcher or telecommunicator to supervisor. And a lot of times you're supervising people that have been doing it a lot longer than you, doing the job a lot longer than you. Fire service 911 didn't matter. If I had to correct somebody that was more senior than me, the first thing I would be say, listen, you have been doing this a lot longer than me. I shouldn't have to have this conversation with you. Why are you having this difficulty and whatever it might be?
Yeah.
And have that conversation and let them talk, right? Let them talk. If they know, I had a dispatcher years ago. I'm like, why are you doing this way? It doesn't make any sense. In this situation, you should have used common sense to do whatever it was. And she says, well, I just did it that way because I don't want to get written up.
Yeah.
What? I'm like, were you operating within policy? Well, yeah. Then why would you get written up? So it's just, if you're not able to have those kind of conversations and be able to, you're never going to get results out of people, at least the way I've learned it. You're never going to get the right results out of people by just walking up, pointing your finger and you're wrong, and this is how you have to do it.
Yeah.
And because I said so.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
a lot of times what happens is, and, and I talk about this in one of my books, is that, when you get promoted, you don't walk into an empty office and a clean slate. You're walking into somebody else's mess.
Yeah.
Right. The person that was there before you developed a culture in that division. Right. So let's say you're a battalion chief and you get promoted and you go to replace some battalion chief that either got promoted or retired. That battalion chief had created a culture on his shift that you have to walk into and either adapt to or try to understand and overcome and change that culture. And that's hard to do. And a lot of people, we don't prepare people well enough, I don't believe, in the fire service to recognize the challenges that they're walking into. Everybody's like, I'm getting promoted. I got a shiny new badge. I'm getting a nice new paycheck. And they don't understand all the problems that they're inheriting from somebody else, right? And that's one of the biggest challenges about getting promoted, is inheriting that broken culture potentially, right? Like, I had my favorites, people that I protected, and everybody knew who they were, right?
Yep.
Now I come in and I'm trying to hold those people accountable, and there could be two camps. There could be camps that defend that individual, and there could be camps that say, finally, somebody's doing something about it, right?
Yeah.
And you have to navigate between the two of them to try to do the right thing and set the standard for yourself. And I think we just do a really poor job in the fire service of preparing people for those kind of challenges. And that's at every level. It doesn't matter if you're fire chief or if you're a lieutenant, if you're a captain, if you're a battalion chief, a division chief, a fire chief, it doesn't matter. You're walking into somebody else's house.
100%.
And you have to fix it, right? Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so true. It's like, if you think about it, if you look at captains, lieutenants, battalion chiefs, they're kind of that middle management, right? And they're in the thick of it every day, where the deputy chiefs, fire chiefs, they may not be as in tune to what these guys are in tune, guys and gals are in tune with the rank and file right there in that middle management, right?
Yeah.
And they kind of make or break that culture in the fire station, like you were talking about. And I have seen where they have gone from that middle management, from being maybe a battalion chief, now they're a division or a deputy chief. And it's a whole different set of liability, whole different lens. And then you become fire chief, and there's nobody else above you. You are it. The buck stops there, and you are ultimately liable for everything that they're doing, including that middle part that we were just talking about.
Yeah. And a lot of it, you're so far removed from, you feel like I'm accountable for stuff I can't even control, right?
Right.
So, and I tell people all the time, my belief is that, I think everybody is responsible for developing whatever the culture is in an organization. But in the fire service, especially, I think culture is influenced more at the kitchen table than it is by any policy or procedure that's put out.
100%. Yeah. What's going to happen in your fire station or stations is sit down at the kitchen table like we are right now, but actual kitchen table in the firehouse. You will know exactly what's going on in that house.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And, and culture is a big thing. I think culture is one of the biggest leadership challenges that, the fire service faces. I've been talking a lot lately about culture. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you probably have read a couple of the articles that I've written on it. And really, at the end of the day, we have all these metrics. We measure patient outcomes. We measure how many structure fires, what percentage of our calls are EMS, and what percentage are fire calls, and how many hours of training is everybody doing, and are we meeting our recertification requirements and our ISO requirements? The one thing we don't measure is our culture, how our people feel. And what happens is we wait until something happens, right? There's some kind of personnel issue. And then every policy that you can turn to in your SOP manual has a person's name attached to it, right?
Yep.
Like we have a long sleeve policy because somebody went out and got a tattoo that, was inappropriate, whatever it might be, right? There's somebody's name attached to it.
100%.
And one of the things that's a challenge for the fire chief is we're always very reactive to culture problems.
Yep.
Because we haven't figured out a way, a lot of people haven't figured out a way to measure the culture and identify where the problems are before they get to be bigger problems. So that we have actionable intelligence to make leadership decisions and implement policies that influence our culture. Right.
Yes.
We do it with turnout times. We do it with travel times. We build stations. We measure all this stuff and we implement changes to improve it, but we don't do it for culture.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, there's nothing worse than working in a place. I mean, it doesn't have to be a firehouse, it can be anywhere, but there's nothing worse than working in a place where the atmosphere and the environment is just low.
Yeah.
And nobody really wants to be there. There really isn't a lot of I worked in a fire. Again, I was a DoD civilian firefighter. I was in a naval base in Virginia, and like things in Virginia are low key anyway, but like there was no ambition to do anything in this firehouse. Like bare minimum. It was we were on a small base, didn't do a lot of calls. We ran mutual aid into the city, but not very often. And like a majority of like training drills were TV drills. Let's sit in and put in a video back then. Let's put in a videotape.
Yeah.
There's not a lot, but then I've also worked in firehouses where what can we do today? What can we train on? What can we fix? What can we make better? It's just two different beasts.
Yeah. And I've seen people leave fire departments chasing 50 cents an hour. And then I've seen people that actually would give up $5 or $10 an hour to stay in an apartment where the culture was healthy and they felt valued, right? Because I think the environment actually carries even more weight than paying benefits do in some cases. Not always, but culture is important. People want to feel valued. They want to feel empowered, and a lot of that comes from, good leadership at all levels.
And that's a good pivot to the work that you're doing now with your leadership group, your leadership coaching. Mm-hmm. What kind of clients, what kind of people are coming to you and say, Chris, I need coaching and my leadership, whatever it might be. Are you seeing like seasoned veterans? Are you seeing brand new company officers? What kind of people are coming to you and saying, Chief, I need some coaching?
Yeah. Good question. And I think really it's all the above. Yeah. The older guys are a little more reluctant to ask for help. So one of the things we talk about is, the lonely chair, being up at the top, you got a very small circle of people that you can go to. And it's probably more important the higher you go, to have a safe place to vet your ideas and brainstorm things. You can't always do it with your deputy chief, right? Because I've had deputy chiefs that, would bend over backwards for me. And I could have a lot of really good, honest conversations with them. And then I've had deputy chiefs whose only mission was to sit in my chair one day, right?
Yep.
And so they have this alternative motive and maybe not give you the best advice. So we have a very small group of people, and then not every fire chief has been through everything I've been through, right? So who am I going to go talk to? So I do see a lot of the veterans, and I see a lot of the younger guys now reaching out because they understand. You look at Tom Brady, right? He's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. He had a coach, right? Yep. His coach helped him get there, right? So for me, it's about I open myself up to whoever wants to make themselves better. If you want to learn how to have a difficult conversation and make the person feel valued instead of threatened, I can help you with that, right? Yeah. I've made some really hard decisions working in my departments, changing programs that the people really loved. And I'll give you an example. I had one of the departments I was in, we had a dive team, and that dive team had been around for, 15, 20 years. And we used to spend a lot of money training people, buying equipment, keeping them certified, not to mention the danger that goes along with diving, right? Like firefighting is bad enough. But when you start diving in some of these waters that we were diving in, it was just a matter of time before something bad happened.
Yeah.
And over the 15 or 20 years, they didn't have one documented save. They were all body recoveries.
Oh.
And the recoveries were actually supposed to be done by the sheriff's office. We were supposed to be the rescue team.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to make a hard decision, and I actually decided to stop diving. And we bought a $100,000 underwater robot that could fetch bodies for us without getting a diver wet.
Nice.
On paper, that was a good idea, right? We saved a ton of money. We took a lot of unnecessary risk away from our people. We couldn't document the reason why, right? We didn't have any saves. And
Right.
then we gave them an alternative to do it more safely, what we were already doing. Well, our department revolted. They did not like that because firefighters are very ego driven, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody got to wear the cool pin saying that they were on the dive team anymore.
Yep.
And, I ended up leaving that department over time, but, that was not a popular decision, but I believe it was the right decision.
Right.
And so, where do you go to, bounce that kind of idea off of somebody to go,
Right.
what are the long-term, second order consequences to making this decision?
Yep.
And that's really kind of the platform that I provide people. And it doesn't matter if it's somebody that's learning to want to be a lieutenant and take that first, promotion, and they're saying, hey, how can I demonstrate myself as being a trustworthy leader in my organization before I take a test? I can help them with that. So I see a little bit of everything, Jason, honestly. And, it's one of the reasons that I started doing this work is, I think that the fire service has a leadership crisis, and I want to try to do something to help people do better at leadership. I think, our profession deserves it, and the people that work in our profession definitely do.
Again, great information. One of the things I was thinking about, have you had any opportunities to work with clients that were having a difficult time? And the reason I'm asking this is because I just did a post about the generational thinking on work ethic in different generations.
Yeah.
And have you had clients that, they came in and they just didn't know how to lead or manage? Hopefully they're leading the younger generation of firefighters that they just can't seem to connect with.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that I've had that specific example as far as the coaching goes, but,
Yeah.
My experience has been, working in the organizations, because this was always a problem. In fact, I put a post out about it recently too. And I think that, one of the things is that, I always say the two things firefighters hate the most, they're change and the way things are.
Oh,
right?
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So we hold on to all these, traditions, and I think tradition in the fire service is good, but it should not impede our progress. Right.
Right.
So for me, I think, there's a lot that the younger generations can learn from the older generations if they can learn to hold on to the important traditions and kind of let some of the other ones go. But I also think that there's a lot that the older generations can learn from the younger. So I think both the younger and the older can teach, and both the younger and the older can learn if we just open ourselves up to those possibilities. You think about the older firefighters, that are fire chiefs, even some of them are still computer illiterate.
Yeah.
Right. Now we have AI, and we're doing all this data analysis and everything else. Well, who better to learn how to do that from than the younger generation who grew up with computers in their hands. Right.
Yep.
So I think we just have to be intentional about being more open-minded on both ends. The younger crowd for the older guys, and, the older guys for the younger crowd. So, that's kind of been my experience. And I think it's getting better in the fire service over time.
Yep. Yeah.
I think it's getting better. And I think, as time goes on, and some of the, more salty people like you and I that are kind of set in our ways move on, you're going to start getting that younger generation in there that's more open to, ideas, right?
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I had a real eye-opening moment, circumstance, because I'm 20 years removed between being a chief officer, right? The first time I did, I was a very young man. I contend to this day, I had no business being fire chief then, but that's a whole different story.
Right.
And now being a chief officer again, and looking at the current generations of firefighters and how they think, how they react to direction or criticism, and what motivates them. And it's so very different because my generation of firefighter, probably same as yours. I'm sure we're cut from the same cloth. You just did as you're told and you learned as much as you can and you told the line and everybody got along. And that's simplifying it, but you know, it is what it is. And now I work with these kids and like I have one, a lieutenant that he is just big on company pride. And I'm letting this kid run with it because it jazzes him up. I mean, he's designing logos for the department and for the companies and on it with AI, and he's probably got 20 different designs, and I'm just letting him run with it because it's jazzing him up. And I'm, you know, great job. You know, if you get buy-in from the rest of the department, then you run with it. And I think that's what really I've identified with the current generation of firefighters is they want to be acknowledged and they want to feel part of something.
Yeah, it's true. You know, it kind of goes back to early when we first started. You were talking about that supervisor that, you know, you didn't want them to catch you hanging around, not doing anything because you'd find something to do, but everybody just did what they were told. And the younger generation, they'll do what they're told, but they want to know the why. They want to understand why we're doing what we're doing. So, you know, a lot of us, we grew up in the fire service where you did what you were told, right? It was it was almost a because I said so thing, right?
It definitely was.
And you can't be successful leading that way with the younger generation. They want to understand why we're doing things the way we're doing it. And that's how you get the buy-in from them. And having that buy-in is really important. I had a group of people in one of my departments came to me and said, hey, you know, we want to. One of the challenges that you have with sending people to conferences is they come back with all these ideas, right? And I guess it's good and it's bad, but they came back from a conference and, you know, all of a sudden they want to do new hose loads. And we had a big department, you know, we were 16 stations, right? And we spent a lot of time trying to, you know, standardize all our equipment. Every engine carried the same thing in the same place, right? They're coming in and they want to do new hose load. And we used to do labor management meetings and I would sit in there and they'd bring it up. And, you know, my answer to them was very simple. I go, I could care less what hose load you use. Doesn't matter to me, right? Whatever you want to do. But here's how I want it done. I want you to identify a couple different hose loads. I want you to bring the crews down to the training center. I want you to show them the hose loads. I want them to practice with it. Then I want you to do a survey and I want to see what the consensus is on what the hose load should be. And if we get a consensus on that hose load, then that's the hose load we'll use. But I want it used across the board. I want a new SOP and I want everybody trained on it. Are you guys willing to do that? And they said, yes. And I let them run with it and they did it. And they did it. It was their idea. They owned it. They took ownership. They did it exactly. I didn't tell them how to do it. I just told them, this is the process that we need to go through to make sure we're doing it the right way. And they were happy to do it. They took off and ran with it.
It's so funny you brought that up because my current generation of firefighters, they got on this kick of doing a new bumper line hose load. And chiefs, we gotta deploy this. We gotta put this hose load in service on our bumper lines. And we went, all right, prove it to us. So they spent all this time. They made a video on it to train the other firefighters in the department. And we let them go with it. We're like, it's a bumper line. We're going to use it for car fires or whatever. But I personally hate it. I don't think it loads well. I think it comes out okay. When they first did it, I go, why don't you just do a triple load? It would be the same thing. No. This is much easier. Okay. And we're still using it because we didn't want to cut them off at the knees of, oh yeah, that's awful. We've never done it that way. We're not going to keep, you know, we let them run with it. And we're still using it. The guys that are using it every day, day in and day out, they like it. Like I said, I personally don't care for it. I don't think it loads very well. But you know, it goes back to what you said. All right, prove it to us. Go out, make the proof and show that everybody can use it. And they did.
Well, and good for you for, you know, stepping out of the way, right? Because that's where a lot of chiefs, you know, trip up and stumble over themselves and say, you know, no, we got to do it my way. And at the end of the day, you know, I might not like the way it loads, but I'm not the one loading it. So why would I lose sleep over that? Right.
Yep.
The guys are actually really good at policing themselves. If
Yeah.
the hose load really sucked, they'd be the first ones to tell the other guys, this is not a good idea, right?
Oh,
We need to do
100%.
something different. They don't need us to step in and do it. They'll do it themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%. They will self-correct when they feel it's not working.
Oh yeah.
And they'll come up with another idea. If you have engaged, committed team members, they'll come up with another idea, because if they don't like it, they're going to fix it.
Yep. Yep.
Chief, I think that's a good way to close this, because I think we came around full circle right from the beginning to the end. And I want to make sure that, anybody listening or watching is able to connect with you. What's the best way to connect? What's the best way to find your body of work and so on?
Yeah. Best place to find me really is at thethinkingchief.com.
Okay.
Or on LinkedIn. You can look up Christopher Armstrong on LinkedIn, and I have a lot of information. And my website has, my training, my speaking, my coaching, online courses, my publications, my books that you can access. So that's really the best place to find me. So either one of those two is where I'm hanging out.
Yeah, I encourage anyone that's watching the podcast today is to go at least look up Chris on LinkedIn. I've seen his content. It is so spot on. Especially if you are in the fire service, you're a fire service leader, or maybe you want to be. Go check out at least what he's posting on. It's an attention society, so go at least check out what he's posting on LinkedIn. I think you find a lot of value in the messages and the points that are made in Chris's topics.
Yeah, I would actually too say, Jason, that if anybody goes there and they read my stuff, make sure that you don't get your feelings hurt easy, because I like to tell it how it is. I just like to lay it out there. I'm in a position now where I don't work in the fire service, and I can have the conversations a lot of leaders avoid about the fire service and things that are going on in the fire service. So, I don't BS around with it. I kind of lay it all out there the way I see it and the way I feel. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. So if you get your feelings hurt pretty easy, just be forewarned.
Awesome. And just to kind of reinforce what we're talking about, I found a quote that I really think kind of resonates with what we're talking about, that leadership is not just about a command presence, your rank, you see these, decision-making authority, excuse me. It's about, having the discipline to think clearly, the courage to reflect honestly, and the humility to seek perspective when the weight of leadership becomes heavy.
Yeah.
Really like that quote. I think it really, like I said, encompasses what we talked about here.
Agreed.
Chris, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you pulling up a chair to the kitchen table here. I'd love to do it again sometime. I think we could dive even farther into some of these things. You know
where to find me. It's been an honor to be here. I can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity just to talk about leadership in the fire service. Our jobs are really to kind of move the needle, and every little bit that we can do helps. So I'm happy to come back again and continue the conversation. I'm sure we can talk about a lot more than what we did today.
I'm confident of that. Again, I appreciate you taking the time. Again, if you're listening to this and you found any value, share it along. In some way, we're going to grow our little community around this. To my brothers and sisters in the fire service, this is stuff that you should be sharing amongst each other and hopefully learning a little bit or two. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Everyone, thank you again for joining episode 6 of At the Kitchen Table. And until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have a great day.